Ready? All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Hopefully we're going to have some people come back in, and maybe somebody will bring me some more ribs, and I'll give you all a break partway through this. But my name is Kevin Riggs. I've worked in information technology for about 20 years, worked as a small business owner, independent consultant, work now in a Fortune 500 company. I've worked as a developer, worked in ops, an analyst, technical lead, and now I'm over in information security as a technical architect. So basically, I don't do anything but don't tell my boss, because I write stuff and he's happy to see it. So that's a good thing, right? If you're looking for me, you can get in touch with me at any of these locations here. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is scaling security out in the enterprise. We have a lot of pieces of security, information security that we can automate, right? We can buy some boxes, we can buy some software, we can train people, and we need that to protect our perimeter, to detect what's inside of our boundary. Those pieces we can automate. One of the weakest links that we keep running into, though, are people. How do we get people where they actually can respond to situations intelligently? They can make reasonable decisions about how to react when they have opportunities presented to them. Phishing attacks, social engineering, how do they know what to do? It's difficult unless you want to take somebody and turn them into a specialist, right? If you want to take somebody out of whatever role they're in and give them a set of knowledge about what they need to do in certain situations, that's great. But now you've taken them from what you're actually paying them to do. So what we want to talk about is, how do we take some of the knowledge that we have, some of the experience that we have, some of the things that we learn about, and hand it over to people in a way that they can then take action on. To be valuable, your information security must be effective. That means you can't just talk about it. You can't just put a slide up somewhere. You can't just put something on a risk register. You've got to have something that people can take action on. You must be effective, and you must produce a result inside of your enterprise. Make sense? I'm seeing people like, yeah, what else are you going to say? No, I don't get that. Okay. The reality is, you want to hand people something that they can actually make some kind of decision about and take some action on. You also must have your information security in some kind of a context. We all work off the same principles. It doesn't matter if it's BITS, NIST, whatever it is that you're working off of for your principles, right? Whatever your controls are, whatever your standards are, when you apply it in your context, what you do may be different than what I do, right? And what I'm going to ask my employees to do is different from what you're going to ask your people to do. Maybe a reason for me to have a competitive advantage in the market. Maybe my business is willing to take a greater risk. Maybe we make some kind of a markup on that, right? But you can't take somebody else's answer and put it into your place. So what I'm going to try and give you are some principles that hopefully you can take back. Hopefully it's going to motivate you and you're going to say, I'm ready to dive into this particular area again. These are soft skills, but this is something that we have to do, right? The stuff that's easy for us, handing somebody a box, handing somebody some training, and we say, go ahead and take care of this. The stuff that might be harder is, how do you have influence in your area? How do you produce that result? At this point, InfoSec's got to be part of your culture. I don't know anybody who was in here for Rolf's, what he presented last time. Anybody catch that? Okay, so a couple of people, yeah. So when he's talking about how people react, right, and what they're doing, if you don't have information security as the beginning of the process, if you're not doing security by design, you're reacting, right? You're just responding to whatever's coming up. And what it means is you have a higher cost on your ownership of the applications, of the network. So you want to get into the culture, but that means you've got to have some kind of a reach as you actually start to engage people. What we found in our company is we run into 3 particular cultural problems. This isn't to say every problem's here, but these are the ones that we see most indicative when we try and scale out our security. You got 5,000 people, you got 20 people working in InfoSec. You got 500 people, you got you and 3 or 4 more people working in InfoSec. Do you have the ability to actually handle everything that those other people are doing? Can you address what they're putting together? So what you need is you're going to have some kind of advocates there. We run into ignorance. It's not to say the people we work with are stupid, not to say they're unmotivated, not to say they can't understand it. But what we run into is when we tell people, this is a problem. You cannot put privileged information into the cloud without encrypting it, without doing some kind of tokenization. You would not believe, I don't know what your experience is. Our experience, my experience is, people are amazed by that. Why? Show me why I have to do that. And so you go and you look for your compliance officer, your privacy officer, and you say, can you show me an example and let me turn around and give that to somebody? How many times can you do that process? 2, 3, 5? At what point does it become too costly? So what you want to do is, we're going to try and build a network here where we can get this out. Another thing we run into, and sadly, is a level of apathy. People don't show up apathetic. They learn it. We teach it to them. We build a culture that drives out of people the motivation to innovate and have a desire to actually do something exciting by the culture that they're in. Part of that burden is on us to change the culture that they're around so that we can have them where they're excited to get involved. And finally, we run into some irresponsibility, and that's just the people that you see who say, I'm not going to do this, and what are you going to do to me? Now, perhaps you can rehabilitate some of those people by showing them what the impact is. Maybe you have somebody from national accounts, from your big customers come in and say, this is why it matters, right? And that can spark in them a desire to say, oh, well, okay, cool. I didn't realize that that mattered. I'm going to react differently. And then again, you might have some people who go all the way to the side of, if I can get away with it, brother, I'm going to get away with it. I'm not just cutting corners. I intend to be this way because I can get what I want better. The solution in this is we're going to build a system of advocates. We're going to have these people. We're going to make it a lightweight system. Hopefully this is something different than you've seen before in terms of what we expect out of them. That's what we think is the critical piece. That's where we think the catalyst is, not just in telling somebody something, but in what we expect out of them. The answer to ignorance is education, inspiration, and finally saturation. You've got to be willing to teach people what it is that's going on, but it's got to be something that they can take, and you have to give it to them in a way that they're inspired to actually use it. I can talk about things all day long. As a matter of fact, Paul Coggin was in here earlier this morning talking about some stuff. If I took some of what he was talking about with BGP and people aren't going to get that. What I need to hand them is, I need to show them our policies. I need to show them our standards, our guidelines, our processes, the controls that we put in place in a way that they can understand. It's got to be something that they can take, put into practice, and move forward with it. I can't just tell them one time. I've got to have them reach out to other people. So we get to reach, right? What is your reach in your environment? When you go into your enterprise, how many people can you talk to and have them actually react? What is your influence? Now, here's a situation for us. If somebody's writing an email about a thing they want to do, hey, we've got a customer who wants us to go to the cloud. We want to use Dropbox, right? And they know that you're included because you're one of the people who makes a decision about information security. Do they already know what your answer is going to be? Do they already have an idea that when they send that out, they're going to hear back from you is some kind of harsh, oh, sure, there's no way you can do that. Have they already pegged you? When you walk into a room and somebody's talking about options, do they already have an expectation of what you're going to say to them, and they're already planning their comeback to you, and it's an adversarial role? Because that's where we want to get away from. We want to partner, we want to collaborate, so our reach has to be something where we're building these connections with people, not where we're tearing them down. Sometimes people just don't like me. It's just the nature of it. So what I want to do is I want to soften that process, right? I want to remove me from that while giving the information out to people in a way that they can do something with. At times, when I say something, it seems like I'm just shouting at the wind. Well, you're just the information security guy. You're just the guy who's going to tell me no to whatever I want to do. You're stopping my business. You're slowing me down. You're costing me stuff. I don't like the way you talk. I don't like what your attitude is about all this stuff because we're trying to innovate. We're trying to do more business. We're trying to move faster and be agile. You guys are just slowing us down. You're just shouting at the wind because I've literally heard the business is going to do this no matter what you say. Anybody else run into that attitude? Yeah, we're going forward no matter what, so you better get on board. That's please. For the love of all that is holy, do not tell the people I work with because they'll use that. I'm just telling you. So here's an example I want to give you. Anybody who knows me, and I know most of you don't, so I've got one or two people here who might know me. I am not an outdoorsy kind of guy. I know you look at me and you think, oh my Lord, he's out running all the time, working in the yard. I'm really not. But my wife and I have actually been working out in the yard. She wants to plant azaleas and irises and tulips and Lord knows what. I don't know the names of the things. I just go out there with a mattock and dig a hole, right? That's my job, okay? That's my country. I buy it at Lowe's and then I go put it in. But once it's in, what I find is I can walk around the yard and I've got a hose and I can water, but I mean, if you all grew up like me, right, how does the water come out of the hose when you're walking around? It's a big bubbling thing that if you're thirsty and it's hot, I mean, it's great to drink. It's going to taste kind of like rubber, but it's great to drink, but it's going to flood whatever you're working on, right? So you don't want to use that. So you might say, hey, I got an idea. I know what I'm going to do. Luckily, I left my prop in here. I'm going to go to Ace Hardware. I'm going to go to Lowe's. I'm going to go to Walmart. I'm going to go somewhere. And I'm going to pick me up a handy little device here. Has all kinds of settings on it, right? And I'm going to set it to mist or shower or what have you. And I'm just going to spray because that's nice and lightweight. And now I'm not killing the plants. I'm not overwatering them. I'm just giving them the right amount. That's what they needed, right? So there we go. Hey, I got so nice and homey, I actually put a little quick disconnect. That's how awesome we are. So now I got like 4 hoses in the yard, and I got something where I can walk around and just spray a nice gentle mist. The plants love me. But the problem is when I'm doing that, let's say I'm on the front porch and I'm spraying the plants on one end. What's happening down on the other end? Nothing, right? So I go down to the other end, I spray. What's happening out in the front yard? Nothing. So now I got to go out to the front yard and spray, right? Backyard, same thing. Oh man, now I got to go backyard and spray it, and so on and so forth. And it's only where I am that I'm making an impact, right? So what we want to do is we want to find these areas where I can put something in place that I can work through that will produce the result that I want to produce. I do want something to soften what I'm delivering. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the principles I'm trying to put in place. I want it to be about how we're going to enable that technology, how we're going to hand people something so that they can do the business they want to do securely. How do they protect the assets, right? So I've got to give them something. So if everybody will look under your chairs, and I think most of these right here in the front, I want you to look for one of these cards taped to the front of it. Anybody got one? I got one guy over here. He's got one. I got somebody else. A couple. Notice nobody with a blue one. That's what I was hoping for. Was hey, we'd get nobody with a blue one. So I'm going to take the people with a purple one. I'm going to say this is one of my advocates. Now the way we're doing this for us, so you get an example. I take 2, 3, 4 people. Let's say I've got 5,000 people in my organization. I'm not trying to change culture 100 people at a time. I'm not necessarily trying to change culture at the CX level. I'm going to get 3 or 4 people and I'm going to say, I want you to come into a room with me, and here's what we're going to do for 4 hours. I'm going to take a half a day. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to the person in my advocacy group about things that they can do, and we've picked out, say, the top 3 things I'm interested in them doing. I've talked to my privacy officer. I've talked to my compliance officer. I've worked through my InfoSec team, and I provide this information to them, and then here's the key that we're looking for. I tell them to go back and do nothing. I want them to go back to their seat, and I want them to do nothing different. I don't want them to have some big epiphany in front of their boss. I don't want them to have to put on some kind of show. I don't want them to do a presentation. What I want this person to do when I hand them this information that's going to empower them and enable them to not only do their job, but to do it with a much richer understanding of InfoSec. When my guy right here with the purple card goes back and he has a conversation with the 2 guys behind him because they're working on a project together. And they say, hey, we're going to go to the cloud. We want to do so-and-so. But he and I have already talked about PII, PHI. We've had a lightweight conversation about what you need to do and where he can find the controls. I've made a commitment to my advocate that if he needs an answer to something and he can't find the documentation, I will answer his call. I can't answer the call of 5,000 people at one time. But if I've got 4 or 5 advocates, I can answer their call. And as I spread them out across my organization, those people have an opportunity to come back to me and say, I didn't understand this. When I read the policy and it says we must protect data, what does that mean to me? How do I apply that? and I can answer his question. Then he turns around in the meeting he's already planning on having about the project they're working on, and he's talking to the people that say, we want to do X, Y, or Z, and he says, hey, I know somebody who can give us better understanding of that, or we've already had the conversation and I know what the application is. Does he have any more job than what he had before? He's having the same conversation he had to have, right? He was already going to be talking to these people about the design of the system, but at this point I've helped 1, 2, 4, or 10 people to have a richer conversation without putting any more overhead on him. This gives him an opportunity to appear or actually be a cross-domain specialist. He demonstrates a mastery of knowledge that he didn't have before. He demonstrates to his team, to his projects, that he has a value he didn't have before, and all his managers had to give up is a day of us talking about stuff. If he gets stuck, he comes to me and talks to me, or he comes to somebody, comes to our director of app security, comes to our director of network security, and I get commitments from those people that they'll be available to help him. At that point, I'm not just spreading the knowledge where I happen to be, right? At that point, I've now gained a couple of people. So he's gotten knowledge and he's gotten tools. I'm also giving him a promise of connectivity. He can connect back to people. And the final thing that he gets that most people don't throughout my organization is he's going to have a feedback loop. How many people don't like what InfoSec does to them when they get to work? Y'all ever hear any griping? Yeah, I see that you're looking at it. How many people don't like in your organization when they're trying to do something and InfoSec has an impact to them? I see people going, I don't know. Do you ever have any development teams who say to you, I was on track until I found out that you all were requiring something of me that I didn't know I had to do? You've run into that situation. My project was actually working. We were on track to be on time, and holy crap, you all knocked us out. We were doing great, and now you've killed us. Right? People don't like that impact. At this point, I have helped him to be able to not only address that from the beginning, but he can come back to me and he can say, hey, Kevin, here's a problem. In our project, the perception is X, Y, or Z. If you all were to change the way you did this, if every time I sent an email in to the IEM team and I said, I need a new identity created for this app. I need an app ID. I need a group. I need whatever. If you all didn't send an email out that said, we reserve the right not to even look at your request for 5 days, it really would just not tick people off as much. That's information I need to know, right? That allows me to change my behavior on my team and address something that's out there. But if I don't have that feedback coming into me, I can't change what I'm doing. Make sense? So now he gets something beneficial, the project team gets something beneficial, his management team gets something beneficial, and we get the feedback that we need to address what we're doing. In that way, I've built out an advocate team. Now, as we do this, we have to consider some other things. Anybody ever heard of Sinek? He has a TED Talk. Okay, yes, okay. So he has a TED Talk about how leaders inspire. Inspirational leadership. And as he looks at the presentations that Apple did on the iPhone when they put out iDevices, how do they create their marketing? He looks at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and what he says. He looks at other speeches and he said, what was it that they had in place that not everybody has? Talking about the why, showing people why something matters so that you're moving from the center spot is where you begin and you move out to the how and eventually people produce the what is way more effective than what we normally do. What we normally do is we tell people the what, then we'll tell them the how, and we couldn't care less if they get the why, right? I don't care why. You all are cogs in a machine, just do it, right? Isn't that the attitude sometimes development teams have? They think that we're just dictating to them. Has anybody ever heard that term? Yeah, okay, we hear that. You're dictating your terms to us. We don't want to dictate. We want to explain why. We want to help people understand how, and then they will produce the what on the back side of that. They'll come back to us with the outcome that we were looking for. But if we don't help them understand why something matters, if we don't bring in the national sales account person, the representative, to say, hey, when Heartbleed happened, instantaneously, we started getting calls. We started getting people who had thousands and thousands of claimants that were covered saying, what are you doing to my customers' data? How are you protecting it? Can you guarantee me that you all don't have a vulnerability? How do you address this? I hear that. Do you all hear that kind of stuff? Do you hear that? Okay, so the customer reps will come to you and they'll go, hey, I got a customer who's sweating bullets about this. Guess what? The development teams don't hear that, right? They're insulated. One thing we've done in corporations, and particularly in our enterprise, we abstract our developers away from that level of customers because they're not exactly the most publicly enjoyable people sometimes. As being a developer, I can say, there have been times when I go into work and I'm thinking, yeah, I probably don't want somebody who's got a multi-million-dollar account sitting with me in my cubicle to talk about it, right? So I can understand there's a value there, but being able to show that direct connection between the value to the customer and when we tell somebody this matters, that's an important piece of this, because if you can't tell those teams, if you can't tell your data architects, your programmers, your analysts, your consultants, if you can't get them to understand why it matters, you're never going to win the battle of getting something done, and you're constantly going to be in contention with people. Here's the beauty of it. Doesn't matter what your title is, doesn't matter what your role is, doesn't matter if you're in InfoSec, if you're in development, if you're in ops, you can lead. You can lead change, you can change culture, right? All you have to be a leader is vision and inspiration. Do you believe that things can be better at your workplace? Do you believe that you can go from being the no person in innovation to the person who's enabling, who's making things better for people who are trying to solve problems for the business, right? If you do, you have to chart it. Remember when I said not only do you have to be effective, but your answers have to be contextual. If they're contextual to your business, you can find a way to deliver solutions. And a lot of it is the way you talk to your partners. Now, maybe you find a mechanism. Maybe you go to Toastmasters and you learn how you can talk. But what we're looking at today isn't just how you can talk to a group of people. It's how you can put a mechanism in place, a program in place that allows you to teach people who will stand in your stead and present information. Because that's where the value comes out. You can't address 50 or 500 or 5,000 people unless you've got the golden checkbook. If you got the golden checkbook, you can decide whatever you want to and they'll follow you. They'll line up all day long. But if you don't have the golden checkbook, you've got to find a way to develop that influence. And what we're talking about is the advocacy program. You inspire people. You give them a vision for how great things can be if they start doing what you're talking about with security, and they're going to follow you. Here are the things that we find people are looking for. What are our policies? Do the developers in your company even know what your policies are? Could they find them if they had to? If a manager tells somebody, I want this done in 3 weeks, and they say, well, we can't do it in 3 weeks because we haven't put this in place. The policy requires us to do encryption. We've not got encryption. We've not tested what we're doing. And the manager says, I don't care, go ahead and do it. Does that person have the political clout? Do they know where to go to be able to defend their statement that they have to do something? If they don't know where the policies are, you're begging them to fail. You're setting them up and begging them to fail. You've got to put things into their hands so that they can actually have that conversation and defend when they say, here's what is required of me in my job. Do they know what the standards are? Do they know what controls they need to use? Have you delivered to them a control set that they can say, in this situation, here's what I have to do. Here's how I apply this control. Here's how I meet this standard to support this policy. And then people ask us, what are our processes? I get calls all the time. I get calls sometimes. I get calls sometimes where somebody will say, yeah, see, I just right through that, thinking through it. I get calls sometimes where somebody will say, what are the processes around changing identification? Because what I want to look at is, how do I know the person and the address if we don't already have a body of this? We don't have a group of those in a repository that I can pull from. Can I simply take one person's name and somebody else's address and match that up? It's not the right person at the right address. That's not a real person at that address. Can I do that? What if I take somebody's name and I flip-flop their first name with somebody else's last name and then I make up a fictitious address? People will ask me how to do some of these processes. Rather than me having to answer all those questions, having something in place and then advocates who can answer that question for people is an important part of this program. So that they're not necessarily coming to me. I have somebody close to them that is a trusted partner with them, that is working on them on a project, and I've given that information to them so that they can then hand that out more effectively. The next thing we come to in terms of the culture is apathy. Now, I don't know about you, but I think, for me, apathy can be combated or can be dealt with by having expectations that I can reach. Can I achieve what is expected of me? If I can't, guess how I'm going to feel about it? What if I told you that for you to keep your job, I expect you to jump 25 feet in the air? How many of you think you can do it? So far, I don't see anybody saying yeah. How many people, if I said, I expect you to jump 3 feet in the air to be able to keep your job, would say you could do it? Okay, I got one guy over here. I got two guys. Okay, 2 people say I could do it. Now, this is unmodified. How's that? I'll say you can't use anything. Okay. What if I said you had to jump 12 inches in the air? Standing flat-footed. No. Okay, so now I got a couple people. Okay. When the expectations for what you're going to be evaluated on are set so high or are so nebulous that there's no way for you to attain them, you begin to lose hope. You feel like you don't have any kind of true control, and the input that you have into your job is questionable. Your ownership of that task is going to be weak. You're not going to feel motivated for it, and you create an environment, or whoever sets that, creates an environment where there is an opportunity for people to just become apathetic, and they think, it's not going to matter. I can't do anything about it. I can't contribute to it. You want to set attainable, not killer expectations, right? I mean, everybody has stretch goals, but you need to have at least some goals that are attainable for people to feel like they can be invested and achieve something. Also, you want to provide that feedback loop that we were talking about. Because none of us in here, this is a worldview question. I don't believe any of us in here are so right that we can say something and believe that we're always right? There's a chance that I could be wrong when I make a statement. Anybody feel any different than that? I'll ask you, turn it around. Can you say, there's never a time that I could possibly be wrong in what I'm saying? See, I see some people, I can see when those eyes turn away, I'm like, you're thinking yes, but you're not going to say. That's okay. There you go. So maybe if our significant other isn't here, you think, I could be right. I don't have to be wrong all the time. The problem is in an enterprise, it's a set of negotiations. It's negotiations between one area and another. But we quite often as human beings begin to feel that something is actually morally and ethically right. It's not to say that there aren't things that are morally and ethically right. That's a different question for a different class. But we begin to become just excited about the things that we think are right. But if we get no feedback, if we have no mechanism for people to come to us and say, I think there's a problem here. I think you're missing an opportunity. I think the thing that you're setting up doesn't address the business need that we have. Then what we give them is an opportunity to be apathetic because they feel like no matter what they say, no matter what situation we create, they can't affect that situation. They have no feedback into that process. Now, does anybody here have that in your InfoSec team? Do you ever hear from people where they say, it doesn't matter, you all have your plans and you're dictating to us and we can't change it? Have you ever run into that kind of an attitude? I'm going to tell you, I've been in development longer than I've been in InfoSec, and I got to tell you, that's the attitude that I and some other programmers, other analysts had, and it was just, it's this big, huge, black box machinery that just shoots out, these are the things that you have to live up to, and I can't affect it. And that can be very frustrating. It's almost impersonal. Anybody remember your first day of school? No, you don't remember? You don't? Okay. No, I don't remember. Okay, so you might have apprehension on your first day of school. If anybody have kids in here? Okay. Do you remember their first day of school? Did they seem excited about going to kindergarten or first grade or even at the beginning of any given school? See, you're looking, your kids, okay, all right, good. I was afraid you were going to say, no, my kids. Okay, so, all right, so there's a little bit of terror, but there isn't that level of apathy, is there? There isn't that, I just don't care and this is just horrible. It might, okay, there you go. I appreciate that. I've got an 11-year-old, so I'm coming up on that, so I'm going to see that. I've got an 11, a 7, and a 5. So mine are getting to that place where it starts off the school year with, yay, this is really exciting, right? Does anybody remember the last job they got? You were talking about coming down here and finding a job. You remember the job that you got the last time when you showed up? Your first day? Somebody came in, shook your hand, handed you a badge, gave you a desk, set you at a phone, told you what your new phone number was, and they said, here's your job. Did you feel apathetic? Did you feel like you had an opportunity? Somewhere along the way, people learn to be apathetic. The culture that we create, the situation that people exist in, is a thing where they learn. Now, they have to own that. We can't say that it's your fault entirely, but the culture belongs to all of us, and as leaders, particularly in InfoSec, people who affect horizontally across an entire enterprise, we have a burden and a responsibility to contribute to changing that culture. If that's the culture you find people in, then what we want to do is we want to lessen the number of people who have those feelings to the best of our ability, give them feedback, empower them, put something in their hands. And one of the ways we do that is by creating this program that has outreach and has feedback. I like this. The first day at work, right? Welcome aboard! And the person's hiding under the desk, right? That doesn't happen typically. You might have apprehension, but until you get in high school, I tell you what, I'll leave the teenagers out of this, right? So until you get in high school, that probably isn't the way you're going to approach it. Finally, here's something that we don't particularly want to talk about, but unfortunately, I find this in InfoSec. I find it on Twitter. I find it on podcasts. I find it on blogs. I find it on posts where people talk about the culture of work, particularly from the standpoint of InfoSec. There is a level of irresponsibility that we sometimes run into. There is a place where people get to the point where they say, not only do I not know if it matters, I don't care if it matters. And here's why. My boss and my project leader tell me that when they evaluate me at the end of the year, when somebody's going to look and decide if I get to keep my job, or if I get a bonus, or if I get a raise, they're not looking at whether I met my InfoSec responsibilities. They're not looking at whether I met all the policies. They're looking at whether I delivered, and did I deliver on time, right? So there is a motivation for people to respond to that situation. They may not understand how InfoSec feeds into their job. They may not see it. That's ignorance. They may not believe that what they do has an impact. That's apathy. They may say, I don't care, I'm motivated to cut corners. That's a level of irresponsibility. The answer to irresponsibility is we marginalize those people. You can't always change their mind. If it's not ignorance, if it's not apathy, if they truly say, I'm motivated to cut corners, we marginalize those people. We do that by getting our message out, by building the program and having the program spread out. And as the program spreads out and becomes more effective across the enterprise, the people who say, I don't care, I'm cutting corners. I got people at my workplace that are like that. I've got managers who say, Kevin, I don't care. It's not going to come back on me. If we get popped, it's not going to hit me. It's going to hit you guys down there. Okay, fine. At that point, that person, I don't believe the attitude can be rehabilitated. They're moving from irresponsibility to truly a level of malice within the enterprise. And I have to document that, right? I have a responsibility to the enterprise to document that and to provide it to the process that keeps track of this, and it leads to eradication. Now, if the process starts and they're willing to be rehabilitated, great. But I think we have to address the fact that there are people, there are actors inside of our boundaries who do say, I'm going to cut corners, even to the point of when you confront them and say, this isn't right. The thing you're doing isn't just a choice, it's wrong. Right? There are people who say, I'm going to continue to do it until it affects me. So finally, effective security scaling is based on collaboration. It's based on collaboration by putting a program in place that empowers people, that puts knowledge into their hands, that puts tools into their hands, that gives them connections so that they can ask questions, and finally, that gives them a feedback loop so that they can tell you what isn't working for them. You can be an inspiring leader, and at the end of the day, your partner's success throughout your programs, as your program spreads throughout the enterprise, your partner's success in what they are doing becomes the horn tooting for your program. Right? You don't have to report up through your manager. You don't have to report up through your VP. You won't have to do that because as other people begin to lessen the pains that they experience, as other people see that they can contribute back into the process and that what they say has an impact, as other people are able to answer the questions at the point where the decision is being made, and they don't have to schedule some new meeting with you, right? So that you can come in and save the day and answer the questions. As you begin to see success scale out through the enterprise, people will come looking for you and say, what'd you do right? What is it that you did and how did you do this? What was it that you were trying to get across to people? Because we want to do more of this. That's exactly the way we want to work. So here is a call to action. You need to find your advocates and saturate your enterprise. You need to prepare to implement new expectations. Remember, you're talking about apathy? Hey, when you start seeing success, and that CXO comes to you or a VP comes to you and says, whatever your program was, it seems to be working. People aren't griping as much that their projects are running behind or running over cost because you all aren't costing them. I'm not hearing that you're a problem anymore. I'm hearing that you all are positive partners. You all are working with these people. You've put a program into place. This is awesome. What do you think we could do extra? And you say, hey, you know what? I've got an idea. What if we had this as an expectation on people, something that they could meet? You put that into place, and now you actually start to gain influence. Finally, you got to work through the process of trying to rehabilitate people or else documenting what's going on so that if the company makes the decision to move them through the process of eradication, you deliver that. It's a responsibility that we have. It's not one that, unfortunately, it feels like I see the attitude all too quickly, but I don't perceive that people actually go through the process. And all that turns into is people griping about their partners. We want to move away from that. We want to provide to the business what it needs to make the decision that it can effectively. And with that, I'm finished with the learning. I'll take some questions on what we're doing or what we can do, or if anybody has any statement on what you all are doing. Yes, sir.
All great and dandy. Where's the penalty for non-compliance?
At that point, that comes into influence. So either you're going to have that process in place, your audit team's going to be there, you're going to have somebody who evaluates non-compliance.
Cut their fingers off or firing them for screwing up.
Well, and that's a place, yeah.
These are all great and dandy, but do we have the political will to actually enforce it? Or is this just another hopeful wish to get people to play the game when we know that HR is not going to fire people no matter how much we threaten them?
And there are two sides to this, the stick and the carrot, right? So you can give somebody positive motivation and negative. What I'm finding as a developer for years was I was frustrated because I could not get to a place where I knew what to do. The expectations that I actually was evaluated on weren't the same ones that I was able to find and then put into place. Whatever I could find either was out of date, the documentation was, the policy wasn't clearly written, or nobody outlined that for me. I can't tell you that this is going to provide you the stick where somebody comes around and says, here's what's going to happen if you do that. I believe as you begin to put these positive policies into place, these positive actions into place, what you're going to find is people will want to do that because they want to succeed. They don't want to be caught on the short end of the stick with their projects. And I get you're only doing it with 5 or 10 people at first. But as you have success with those people, it will begin to scale out. And at that point, you begin to gain greater influence so that when I got here for this prepare to implement expectations, that's exactly what we're talking about. When you can put expectations on an annual review for somebody and you can say, you will deliver secure solutions, and if you don't, it's you that gets kicked out. It's you that gets fired. It's you that gets censured. It's you that takes a pay cut, whatever it is. That's where you have to get there. But you have to have success in the partnership. I don't mean to minimize the piece that you're talking about with the, that's got to happen. But before you get to that point, here's the thing. Information security costs, right? We're a detraction from the bottom line. We cost every enterprise that we're in. We don't make money for the company, do we? My company sells insurance. I promise you, information security isn't something that we make money off of. My salary, all of the analyst salary, all of the ops people's salary is negative. If I want to go from being a negative on the bottom line to being a positive, I've got to do something that enables the business, that enables the innovation that they want, that demonstrates my partnership and the value that I have, and I've got to be able to document that so that when I go to the business and I say, here's what you're getting for what you're paying for, I can say that, but as my success begins to roll out through the program across the enterprise, I think that the success of those programs that are out there, they're going to hear about that rather than hearing the griping, well, I'm running late on this project or this project's running over because I got this infosec, at the very last minute, Identity and Access said I had to do X. Or at the very last minute, I had an analyst review what I was doing, and the AppSec person said, no, we couldn't do what we wanted to do. And so that cost us another 6 weeks of development. Excuse me. So what I'm saying is, I think you can get to the place where you want to be. We have some people in our company who want to see the same kind of thing, but until we can deliver that benefit and we can articulate it well to the business, we can't get that power. Does that speak to what you're talking about?
I hear it. It's one of the problems that when you get HR to buy in, and the company's internal or external counsel is willing to suffer through a lawsuit or two.
Right.
No offense, this is all what we've been trying to do for 40 years.
Yeah. This is the soft side of it. It's easy for us in InfoSec, and that's not to say that we've always done a poor job of it necessarily. Some people are more effective at it. A lot of times what we find is a company gets popped, and there's a financial number. Somebody puts a number on a piece of paper and says, this is what you have to pay. And suddenly the influence of the InfoSec team, the influence of the information security, the risk management team skyrockets. They want you in every meeting. They want to know, hey, can you all promise me if you sit on this meeting, if I roll this solution out, am I going to be okay, right? And so, just overnight, the ability, the value of the input, although it may be a whole new set of people who are having the input, but the value of that input skyrockets. What we're talking about trying to do, and that's not to say that people haven't tried before, is trying to roll out this program where we say the key to this, the critical point to this is, I'm not asking anybody to do anything special. Right? I'm asking them to go back and have the same conversations that they were having before. I don't want them to have some kind of special presentation. I want them to talk to the same people, the same technical project managers, the same data architects, and in so doing, I want them to feel empowered with the knowledge that they may not have had before about where to find a policy, how to implement the policy. So I think that it's in the nuance of, that's the piece that we're asking people to do is, do exactly what you were doing before, but with a richer set of knowledge. And in the end, I think what you're going to end up with is a level of influence that allows you to say, I think we need to go through this painful process. I think that's a very good point, because it is something that people have been trying. How do you get information security in by design?
I'm old and jaded.
I can understand. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Knowledgeable, wise. That's what I'll say. Wise and knowledgeable. And I appreciate that investment.
Reference the slide on apathy. And that's where you get to, you can't meet the expectations because the expectation is zero problems. We ain't going to get there.
Yeah.
My organization actually has a very interesting way of rewarding employees for doing things right. Every week, you get poker chips. You got your poker chips left at the end of the week. You get cash rewards. So it translates to cash reward for doing what you're supposed to do. So we have a set of rules, whether it be you buy by discount, or for example, it fails to document a critical change, okay, you're going to lose maybe 2 chips.
Okay.
If you misspell something in critical documentation, that's 1 chip. If you sell a product to a customer and actually put it on the computer, give it to them, no, that's 3 chips.
Okay.
So you're thinking about how many chips you get. So that's actually turned into its own quality control system. It's turned into its own system of rewards. You come in and you're not clean shaven, that's a chip. Close the ring, that's a chip.
Now, there's a contextualization right there that we're talking about. That works in some businesses where you can financially incent people, right? And that's a piece of that business. There are some business models where, because of the size and the volume, the scope, that becomes difficult, and I'm not going to say that other people don't do it. In our company, because of the size of the company, we do it in such an abstracted way, people don't tie the two together. So at the end of the year, people are going to get a bonus, right? You did a good job, you're going to get some kind of a bonus. You did a good job, you're going to get some kind of a raise. But if you cost us money, you're going to be penalized. The problem is, it could be 12 months after you did the activity before you see the results, right? And in that way, we stretch that out. I think a lot of people do, well, I hate to say this because the proof is in the pudding and the details of what you're doing there, right? The details difference is you all are tying it immediately to the behavior. And what we're talking about is, in a different kind of organization, being able to tie it to something, but it's stretched out, the terms, the distance is so great, people can obfuscate the mistakes they had, and now they have time to actually put a spin on it. So in some cases, I have a director who says, I'm going to buy some software for socks. Okay, great. By the time he comes to somebody and says, hey, can you all evaluate the software for SOX? I've signed the contract. The check's gone out the door.
This is a cultural issue, and yes.
Exactly.
And I saw a case, and I'm going to say as politically correct as I can, even though I don't believe in political correctness, and this was in a financial firm in Boston, and the person who really, really screwed the pooch was a person of color, gay, in a wheelchair. He had to go. HR said no. What do you do?
And there are cultural and political issues within a context of an enterprise that we have to be mindful of. And that's the place where building your influence, building your reach, that was what I had on one of the slides, was reach, which speaks into what's your influence. Having the ability to say something to people and not be seen as just the InfoSec guy, but as a trusted partner. A person who delivers success. How many of us feel like that when we go into work? Do we feel like our attitudes and what we bring to the table is just as valued as the people who are making the money on the side of the table? Sometimes not as much.
Different than an annual awareness program. I think what InfoSec has been doing for years is a bad compliance exercise. And that's when we say we've been doing this for a long time. That's actually what we're, you know about security, right? Okay, check that box. We're good. Whereas what we've got to move to, I believe, is more of this, more of a
continual.
We've got to put work into it. We have to put active collaboration, planned collaboration,
Conversations.
two-way,
Yeah.
all of that.
15-minute, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, though, that's so much different than just the checkbox, just the awareness, and those kind of things that go on.
So for us, a 15-minute CBT, where somebody views it and it says, you cannot do X. And they walk through that and click. Oh yeah, I've got to click on this. A, B, C, this one was B. A, B, C, this one was A. And they go through that and they say, well, I took the CBT. I'm certified for security, right? I'm good for the next year. Yeehaw. And then 2 days later they say, hey, why are you all killing me on this project because I can't do X, Y, or Z? And you say, do you realize the thing you want to use was specifically by brand name prohibited? It was in the CBT that says, in our enterprise, you are not allowed to use this. There's a level of disconnect. People don't realize what they're looking at on those CBTs for 15 minutes. What we're talking about is continual engagement with an attitude towards empowering people regularly. Again, I'm going to come down to we're delivering something to them that's lightweight. We're looking for continual communication so that they can engage us and a commitment to them, and we're also giving them a feedback channel. That's really the thing that we're looking for, is that partnership and that communication. Yes, sir?
I love what you said about that. I work for a company where multinational, all over the world, 7,000 employees. The InfoSec department is about 4 years old. I'm the manager. That's it. We're part of two for multinational.
Wow.
Yeah, we're not all So advocacy is like, that's going to be my best friend.
Yeah.
Where do you start to get that call to arms? I can tell you, my predecessor was very passive, very last thought. He wanted to be the bring a team ready to understand this. I'm not that guy. But that's what I've been handed. And, when you try and talk to people or whatever, to get them on board, some people are gung ho, some people are not. So how do you,
Right.
what's the best way to identify those attitudes? Particularly, if I just go to marketing, it's like, okay, good luck.
So there's a spectrum of people, right? There are the people who want to wear the ninja, they want to put the gi on, and they want to go there. I'm the security ninja guy, and you're like, I'm not going to hand you the keys to the kingdom so that you can go whack people because you want a license to just walk in and that. Okay, and then you've got the reluctant people on the other side. What we're really looking for are people who are willing to be passionate about their job. I could care less if they're passionate about InfoSec, because if I can show them that InfoSec is their job, this is your responsibility. That's the connection I got to make. When I find a person who's passionate about their job, maybe they're frustrated about the stuff that they felt stopped in being able to do. Maybe they don't like feeling stymied. Maybe they're a person who's frustrated because they don't know the answer. And if they just knew it, right? So I'm looking for somebody who's willing to be passionate about their job. I find the people who seem to me like they're invested in what they're doing, they're committed to what they're doing, and then I say, hey, could I talk with you about what I think is going to make this better for you? And the way we couch it is, if you have the tools at the point that a question came up, if you're sitting in a group of people talking about a solution and a question comes up about what do I have to do, right? If you're a regulated industry, what's required of me? If you're talking about your customers, what do my customers expect of me? And you've ever said, I don't know. And then you say, well, who do we call or who do we talk to? I don't know. If you're that person and that frustrates you, I want you to come talk to me. And what we find is people are like, yeah, that sounds great. I don't know what you're talking about, but that sounds awesome. And at that point, we've got a small seed, and we're not necessarily talking about InfoSec. We're talking about empowering their job, and then it grows into, somebody actually having answers. Again, these aren't going to be giants in the field necessarily for InfoSec. They're going to be advocates, and it's little pieces. And you change culture a little at a time by having a different vision. That's what we're really trying to do, and having that continual engagement. So, yes, sir?
So I've seen a lot of them versus us mentalities with developers and InfoSec.
Never noticed that. Having been on both sides of that table.
How do you get developers not to see these advocates as puppets basically as InfoSec, and the developers to kind of push away from that advocate?
So you don't want to have people who are particularly polarizing. You want to have people who do a good job. You want to have people that before they came to you, they were recognized as being competent at the very least in their area. This is a person who's good at what they do. Maybe they're great at what they do, right? Maybe they're the person who's willing to spend an extra 4 or 5 hours one night working on something. Maybe they're the person who is the go-to technical lead for something. And you need to, I don't want to say you need to target. It's especially helpful as you're rolling this program out if you can find those people and target those people because they already have a level of influence with their peers. And it doesn't have to be great, right? Because I'm not asking this person to go talk to the CIO. I'm asking this person to talk to the 4 or 5 other people on her project team, right? That's what we're really looking for. When we find that person who has that level of investment in what they're doing and they just want to do it a little bit better, that's really what I'm kind of looking for. And when that happens, that person's interest, just like I was talking about, I use the visual illustration. I want a mister to change so that I don't have a flood pouring out and killing whatever. I want something that'll mist. At that point, whatever my message is, however strong it may have felt, however much frustration I may have had when I tried to say something to empower people and they were like, it's us versus them, right? At that point, I use the value of the credibility that person has with their peers, and that softens the message. Because when he or she says, well, we really do need to consider, can we do this? And if so, how do we do it? That has a different impact than if I walk into a room and I say, hey, wait a minute, y'all got to slow down on this project. You can't go sticking, social security numbers out in box.net. You all can't, you can't stick this data out there, in Dropbox. When I do something like that, I'm seen as the InfoSec guy, I'm saying no. When this other person says, hey, wait, let's have a conversation about this, I'm not sure we can do that, that starts to break down that barrier. And now it's not my voice that they hear, it's actually somebody else that they already value their input as a partner. So.
The rest of what I said to add to it is what you're trying to do is take somebody who's successful and credible and help them be more successful and credible on their job.
Yes.
And you're taking advantage of there are 3 kinds of power. There's role power, there's relationship power, and there's expertise power. InfoSec has often relied on role power.
Yes.
What he's talking about is creating relationship authority with other people and leveraging it through them.
Yes, absolutely, and I appreciate that statement. That is where we're making that transfer. We can't give up the fact that we have a responsibility. We can't give up privacy. We can't give up compliance. Those are absolutes. I'm not talking about changing that. I'm talking about changing the culture by taking your message, putting it in the hands of people who are already trusted friends, trusted partners, and let them see the application. Because when they understand the why and the how, When they understand why it matters and how they implement it, they become your best advocates because they're already invested in doing a good job. And at that point, it's not my voice that the people hear, it's somebody else giving them the same message. And that breaks down a lot of barriers. So, anybody else? I can't promise you this works and you have to put it into your place. I can tell you this is a step that we're trying because I came to this job in InfoSec because after 15 years working at a place, or 14 some odd, I was tired of going out to lunch with other developers and hearing how ticked off they were and how much they hated the culture. It sucks when people do this. Well, you know what? I'm tired of complaining about it. Let's change it. This is what we're trying to do. We're actually trying to change the way that this happens. We don't give up the keys to the kingdom, but at the same time, I don't have to scream at somebody to get them to not give them up. Right? So, thank you all for your time. Thank everybody for the comments. I really appreciate it.